We have been on a journey here at the Deep End. We've sought to immerse ourselves in a sea of wonder regarding the evolution of the universe, from being to life, to self-consciousness, to self-awareness. Now, I've reduced this process to three essential processes that allowed all of everything to evolve. Three: differentiation, complexification, and semi-permeability. That's what's been going on since the first hydrogen atom, and it's brought us all the way here. So here we are, a species that is self-aware and now intentionally involved in our own evolution. Think about that. And now waking to self-awareness. What were the earliest stories that hold, or at least attempted to capture this moment where we became self-aware? Believe it or not, the story is one of the most misinterpreted stories in all of history. It's the story of the Garden of Eden. Now the church, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, the church has done a huge disservice in tying this story to the notion of original sin, which, to be honest, if you look at the study, it's really a problem of the family of origin for Augustine and his inability to deal with his own raging hormones and his response to that, or I should say reaction. But that's another story. My point here is that the church missed the whole intent of Adam and Eve's journey from mere animal to self-awareness, to consciousness of self. I am convinced that the story of Adam and Eve is an ideological myth. That means it was probably just someone around a campfire said, you know, hey, we're sitting around a campfire and we know we're sitting around a campfire. How did the fact that we know get here? And some old woman or guy just went into the story. Now think about who the characters in the place of the story is. Eden. Eden is a paradise. It's a balanced place of perfect harmony. Think about that. To me, that's the place where our genes are still ruling us. We don't have to think about stuff. You know, after 19 hours or 9 hours, whatever, a duckling will just bond on whatever it sees, whether it's a human or a dog or mama duck. Eden, a paradise, a place of perfect harmony. And the characters emerge. Adam, which means the son of the red earth, and Eve, whose meaning is life, the livingness of life. They emerge and they get together, and they're living in this place of perfect harmony, right? I mean, my chickens are living in a place of perfect harmony as long as I keep feeding them. Anyway, there are two trees that confront them: the tree of life and death and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And a mistake is made, okay? And I want us to get this. The apple is a mistake only because it seems outside the purview of what humans were experiencing at the time. And who offers Eve, the snake? Who offers life, the livingness? It's the snake who offers the apple. Now, who is the snake? Think about this. The snake is the one who sheds its skin. It grows so it can't grow anymore unless it sheds its skin. And that was the exact position of human beings that were, I should say, the proto-human being that is Adam and Eve. And the snake offers this apple, this forbidden fruit, if you will. And they take it. And what they learn is they wake up. They wake up. Not only did Adam and Eve taste the apple, but they knew that they tasted it. They knew that they were going to live and it could be good, or they could live and it could be bad. The two trees, think about it, life and death. That was the moment that humans became aware that they were going to die. Other animals don't have that awareness in the way we do. We're going to die, that we ate off that tree and we became aware. The other tree was the knowledge of good and evil. And I've talked about this before, that knowledge of good and evil is the simple fact that what makes you live is good and what makes you die is bad. So the tree of life and death and the tree of knowledge are related in a very, very intimate way. It's an amazing thing when we think of the story in those terms. At the moment when the snake convinced this strange species to shed its skin and grow beyond the garden itself. It's just, to me, amazing. Now, this is a good Western story. In the East, it's interesting trying to find the stories that represented it. It's almost like consciousness was part of everything at a unitary level, and it rises into self-awareness. It's the one inside the many waking to the wonder. There's a point where we begin to wake to the very wonder. And the image I had as I was reading some of the stuff from India was a wave rising up and looking out upon itself and realizing it was the ocean. That to me is a great image. Now, today, our stories are different. There are a number of threads you can pull on: genetics, brain and brain size, cultural stuff. It's in my studies, it talked about self-consciousness being there from anywhere from 2 million years ago to about 200,000 or 300,000 years ago, and it was stable. And then somewhere between 65,000 and 50 years ago, they call it the Great Leap Forward. Something happened. We know that by 65,000 years ago, there was seafaring. There were complex weapons and technologies being made, bows, fish hooks, sewing needles, ceramics, art, drums, and flutes. And again, the seafaring, able to construct something that could sail the seas. Now, what is self-consciousness? That sets us apart as a species, as a unique expression of life and being. We can see that we're an expression of life and being. We can see that. My dog knows he's eating food, but he doesn't know that he knows it. The ancient stories show us that the veriest earliest of our ancestors were engaged on the front lines of this great mystery that is our self-awareness. Some seen as a blessing, some seen as a curse, some of us see it as both. And because now we are responsible for what we do. We've eaten off the trees, however metaphorically we may interpret that. And what we do, we are now accountable. And we make more life, more goodness, more justice, or do we make more death, more suffering? See, this is the same issue that is upon us now that has been upon us since the very beginning. The stories of how we came into this self-awareness and the responsibilities inherent in that waking, I think those stories are so important. And again, as someone who spent so many years in the church, I should say decades, it always disappointed me that so many people held on to this sin thing. And I think it misses the mark, because what's happening here is more like an algorithm. It's more like human beings waking up to the algorithm of themselves, and we become aware when we go wrong, and we say, not that way, and we go this way. Think of after the Second World War and the discovery of the atomic bomb. The whole human species woke up and said, not this way. And hopefully we're getting to the point where we can embed that at a little deeper level. Because what's really about, consciousness is trying to do something. And the stories of our self-awareness and how it happened, I think those stories are helpful. And again, it allows us some solidarity with our most earliest ancestors and know that we're on the same road, same questions, and reaching in the same direction of the mystery with metaphor and stories and narratives and ways to somehow talk about this. Now, I just laid out a whole lot. Marianne, I'm going to turn it over to you first. My name's Red Hawk. We're at the deep end, and Marianne Rudis is coming to us from Spokane Valley, Washington. Bob is coming to us from the state of Florida. And Marianne, what say you on the stories and of this origin of self-awareness?
Well, I was kind of hoping you would go to Bob first, but you did lay out quite a bit there. Um, I think as you were talking about, I was raised obviously in the United States and in the with the Western ideas and the story of Adam and Eve and the idea that the snake that sheds its skin in order to grow, and that us as human beings must shed our old ideas or whatever it is that holds us back from growth, and so that we are always growing, and that the idea that if when everything was perfect in the Garden of Eden, everything was harmonious, and that somehow to stay the same is good. And we can see that happening in our political parties, where one of them is considered bad and one of them is considered good, depending on what you want to do with your life. Do you want to grow? Do you want to be responsible? Or do you want to be governed and ruled and everything stay the same, kind of in a bubble almost? And I just, for me, I have to grow. I have to change. I have to learn new ways of being a human being, what it means to be a human being, because the things that I was indoctrinated with, the things that I was taught, the things that I was learned, I always viewed them as kernels. There were always kernels of truth there, but there were things that could be expanded on. And so when I start to think about what is consciousness, it's the idea that I'm aware of this life that I'm living rather than just living it. And from this awareness of this life, then the idea that, well, what is the meaning of it all? Why is it even here? Why are we doing this? Why should I grow? Why shouldn't I just stay the same? And those are the things that I think this whole show has been exploring since the beginning in every different way. Anyway, that's kind of all I have to say about that right now.
Well, and we're still leaving the garden. It, is what I'm feeling after you talk. The shedding event isn't over. It's something we have to keep doing, and realizing that our comfort is sometimes that which is trapping us and holding us a prisoner. So, Bob, what say you?
Well, I'm going to muddy the water like I normally try and do.
I don't think you have to try.
Yeah, it's natural. I certainly agree with in basic principle for everything you've said about the myth of the Garden of Eden and everything that Marianne has said about our awareness and wanting to move forward. But I think that there's I'm going to put on my psychology hat now, and I'm going to differentiate between self-awareness and self-concept. Because self-awareness is something that all humans have. We are aware that we exist, that there is a tomorrow, that our actions have certain consequences. Now, we get into self-concept. That is what it's almost a unique experience for each and every one of us. We identify ourself. We throw this word around, self-awareness, self-concept, and so forth. But when you get inside the individual and try and determine how he or she views their self, it's almost a unique thing to each and every one of us. And there are certain characteristics that are shared. And there's a great book by Eric Newman, The Origin and Evolution of Consciousness, where he showed that in the early days, our self-concept was not of ourself as a unique individual, but as a member of a tribe, of a family, of a country, or whatever. And it's only later on in our evolution that we have begun to develop, and mostly in the West, by the way, the idea that each individual is unique and is a unique self. And what we need to determine, and this gets back to what you were saying, Marianne, about the way the different parties identify each other. And it's how the members of those parties identify the party as being a component of their self-concept, that they can't exist without that piece. And there are many, many different pieces that each one of us has when we define our self-concept. Some of them are healthy, some of them are not. And as we become more aware of ourselves, we can begin to tease out those parts of our self-concept that are detrimental to our healthy existence and ability to move forward and to take control of our lives. And it's not an easy thing to do, and it's part of our quest to become more self-aware.
And what you've identified is not self-awareness, but a component of self-awareness, which is
Exactly.
this almost management tool that we use to balance ourselves within our culture and within our sense of own autonomous being, if you will. But one thing I think that I want us to get, and Bob, you intoned it, and Marianne, I think you nailed it, and that's that whatever's going on, it's a growing event. And the West, out of St. Augustine, I don't want to really call him Saint. Augustine, he turned the whole thing into this huge disobedient thing, and he focused on something that to me polluted one's own awareness of the self, which I think, as Bob was talking, boy, does our self-concept been polluted by these understandings. But it's important for us to see that we didn't come into this all at once. In the movie Lucy, she's there with the first human being, allegedly, who's thinking outside her own genetic possibilities, if you will. And I think that that's what has to happen to the species right now. We are in a garden of a different order right now. And, for those of you who follow these podcasts, the Bible starts in a garden and ends in a city. And the city is supposed to analog the perfect harmony and the balance under the dominion of human beings in a way that God would compassionately rule it. And with justice and fairness and all these things, that eating off the two trees created this moral universe that we're still struggling with and trying to figure out how to deal with it. But I want to make the point, we're always shedding our skin. If you're the same person you were 10 years ago, I'm sorry. Hopefully we're all growing. And I have said this before, and it's integral to my relationship with my wife and my kids, is love. And a true relationship is a growing thing. If we all fit together, we're all growing in different ways, but still accepting each other's differences. And I think this is a huge part of the garden and the skin we're trying to shed today, is this awareness. And Bob, you brought it up, in the West and East, there's a huge divide in terms of how we understand who we are and how we are. Science is trying to bring those together. But I'll be honest, science can't. Consciousness is a different thing, because when it seeks to look at itself, we end up in a house of mirrors, and the reflections are refracting in so many different directions at once that it's very difficult to trace one light that's reflecting, one idea reflecting through that. And I think that is what the spiritual journey is about, is to enter that house of mirrors, to find one's growing edge and to shed the skin of the past and let the vision of tomorrow somehow seep in some creative way that creates more wholeness, more health, more justice, more goodness.
Yeah, we have to learn to get out of our own way.
Yeah, good luck, human beings.
We have so many components to this self-concept that many of which we didn't really invent ourselves. We were socialized into them, whether it's through Sunday school or through family interactions or through events in our life. We have all of these components, and most of them are not really true. You know, they're our distorted view of the world. But when we look in the mirror, it's not a clean reflection. It's more like a funhouse mirror that's been distorted by all of these different pieces of ourselves. That's what Jung was getting into when he was trying to identify the different components of the conscious and unconscious mind that we are, I don't want to say ruled by, but we are affected by all of these different components, many of which, maybe most of which are unconscious. But the idea that we're going to grow is that in itself is a radical thought to most people. Well, I'm going to change the way I look at the world. That's a tough thing. So making that first step, I think, Marianne has talked about this a lot of times, that we take charge of our life. We take charge of the decisions we make. And that's a difficult thing because we're set up to avoid having to make those decisions, to be able to run on autopilot, if you will. And growth is really turning off that autopilot and really taking charge and identifying within ourselves the distortions that keep us from growing.
Yeah. Amen.
Well, and when you talk about, we have these distortions, but are they, or are they just a different view? And that we only see them as a distortion when we are introduced to someone else's view. And that it seems like that other view is more just, has more life, for those things that you were talking about in the beginning, Red Hawk. And so that's when we start to recognize that, okay, maybe our views are distorted. Maybe they are not the only way to be. And so I like that idea of thinking of it as these, we all have these distorted views. And every single person in one way or another has something that can be improved upon, that, yeah. And maybe that's maybe that's the whole point of all of this, is we go from the idea that we want a ruler that is just and brings about more life. And we learn to self-rule with justice, with more life for all, with, we're growing and correcting our own views, but we're doing it because of, we're each doing it in our own way because of those distortions that we had to overcome. So it's like this, is it a growth? Is this all about learning and growth? I think Ellen Watts talked about that a lot, where it's just about learning and growth. And I don't know, it's...
Well, yeah. And you've both given me some ways to think about this, that especially the role of art and storytelling and how it holds a vision of both dystopian and utopian. And we can see which is which. And, as you were talking, Marianne, I was thinking about TVs, how every 4 or 5 years we get a higher resolution TV. And I think that that's what human consciousness is doing. It's moving into higher orders of resolution to understand at least the context. We can't, we don't understand our content yet. We're still like, what the fuck are we? We're moving from I've been watching This Is Our Planet or something on Netflix. It's just an amazing series. And how this marauder ant is so organized, and they offer health care to the wounded ants, which is very interesting, which means they can go out and fight another day. And that we're moving from this centralized way of thinking to a way where each piece has internalized what was once central. Again, Marianne, we want a just ruler, and yet maybe what we need to do is learn what that means for us so we can elect a just ruler, and how we do that, and to what end does our society get to? Do we really care? I'm right next to Idaho. When I was working with homeless, we had more homeless people coming from Idaho because Idaho didn't give a damn about its homeless population. Just leave, get the hell out of here. And we actually care in this state about our homeless population, although some of the things our mayor has said don't reflect that. We make it too easy and comfortable for people to be homeless. That was what our mayor said. Do you believe that? And I think that this gets into another aspect of a component, just like the self-concept. There's something running the show, some energy that really does want it to be balanced and fair. And I don't think I just feel that in my own heart. I think I've seen that in so many people's hearts, that's a huge piece of this self-awareness. And that thread goes right back to the two trees, knowledge and of life and death, and good and bad. We're still on the edge of Eden, if you will, and as a human species, I wish us so much luck and blessings.
Because we're going to need all of that. But what you're talking about then is a higher consciousness that, we called God, and God has become such a baggage word anymore, that it's hard to be able to, but it really is that idea that there is something that is working towards a just and a humane world for humans.
Yeah.
But everything we can conceive of is a baggage word.
Yeah.
One way.
Well, we're getting to the end, so Bob, make your final comment, and then I'm going to let Marianne make her final comment.
Okay, baggage words. I'm going to use the new Speaker of the House as an example. His name's Mike Johnson, and he says that his worldview is based on the Bible, and that's all he has to say about it. Now, his concept of the Bible, based on his actions, is very, very different than my concept of the Bible, and I think is true for the two of you. It's interesting that people fight to put the Ten Commandments on courtrooms, but they won't fight to put the Beatitudes, where you talk about peace and justice and loving our neighbors. So just saying the Bible is my worldview and leaving it at that is a really, really bad conglomeration of essentially nothing. So I think we got to watch out what our concepts are. We got to tease them apart. We got to get to the bottom of them and realize that part of why they're there are to make our day-to-day life easier so we don't have to question. But that's not what we should be doing. We should be questioning all the time.
And I think that's a huge, one of the first things that popped in when they ate that apple was a ton of questions just came cascading down on them. Marianne, final comments?
Well, see, and I think I love that, but the idea that there's the New and the Old Testament, and the Old Testament eating that apple was the greatest sin. That was wrong. And in the New Testament, it's about it seems like if we tell that story in a different way, it was the best thing for humanity because it is what allows us to be able to grow. And so we're looking at the Old Testament where we want everything to stay the same. We want this ruler that gives us the actual commandments on the way to behave. And then in the New Testament, where it's you are responsible. You need to love your neighbor. God is present when you are present with others. And so I think that the idea of, I mean, the show was on consciousness, right? And it is an evolving thing, and we're growing, and we have to not be afraid to ask questions, because I think that's the beginning.
Amen. And I think part of what's going on is we're afraid of the next questions because they're so big. And this is where we, between Bob and Marianne, you scratch the surface. There's those who want someone to tell them what to believe and to do and for everything to be happy and be nice. And then there's those who want to think for themselves and, that whole thing. The Secretary General of the United Nations in his yearly speech said the world is becoming unhinged. And it's not just the world. Everywhere is becoming unhinged. America is becoming unhinged. Between the authoritarians and the progressives, I guess is what they could be called. The authoritarians are those they just want someone to tell them what to do, and they'll do it, and what to believe, and if it works, they'll believe it, and everything will be honky-dory. Well, that's where we're going to go next week, because America's in a really interesting fraying, if you will, and that fraying is going to come to bear on all of us, whether you're in this country or not. Now, here's what I've learned, and I'll try and tease this out next week. If you study American history, you find that when we're peering over the ledge, when we're looking at that place where we're most scaring ourselves that we've really come to pass, that's when we're most on our growing edge and a new creativity can get in. And I hope I live long enough to see it. I really do. Until then, my friends, stay aware, find your growing edge, and in all things, be real. Blessings.